The Ideas Exchange, in association with HSBC.
Business minds are shaping the modern world. They've revolutionized our lives with technological innovation. They forge new relationships between entire continents. Their decisions affect what we do, how we work, where we live. In the Ideas Exchange, top executives travel the world to question one another.
Well, here we are.
They come head to head to reveal the challenges they've faced and their strategies for success.
This is the last frontier. This is the biggest potential, untapped potential that is left in the world.
Sunil Mittal is one of India's most successful businessmen. He started from scratch as a teenager, making bicycle parts, and then moved into telecoms. His company, Bharti Airtel, has annual revenues of $13.5 billion.
When the opportunity came to provide mobile services in India, we knew this was the right place for us to be. Nobody could have assessed how far this would go.
Sunil now runs the 5th largest mobile phone network in the world. And he hasn't stopped at telecoms. He is also investing in agriculture and retail. This entrepreneur is on his way to meet one of Britain's top admen in London.
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting a person who I believe will give me some very interesting insight and always has a point of view which is different.
The adman in question is Sir Martin Sorrell, founder and chief executive of WPP, the world's biggest communications services group.
Then suddenly an idea hit me. Put us puppies on the paper.
His advertising, marketing and public relations empire is responsible for how we perceive some of the world's most iconic brands. Martin has a reputation for getting what he wants in business. But he is sometimes accused of being a bean counter.
I do like counting beans, and the more beans I count, the better it is.
His companies are responsible for around 1/5 of global spending by the big advertisers. Martin's role brings him into contact with some of the most powerful people in the world, and he's received a knighthood from the British Queen. But there have been controversies as well, including hostile takeover bids and recently a shareholder revolt over his pay.
Sir Martin Sorrell, who runs the advertising giant WPP, took a 17% increase last year, but he says in previous years, when things didn't go well, his pay fell.
So what can a British adman learn from an Indian telecoms billionaire?
He's an entrepreneur, started from scratch, so I would claim some similarities. He combines the two things that I think are absolutely critical. So he has the entrepreneurial energy, vigor and success, and he has managerial qualities. Basically what I'm interested in is understanding what makes Sunil tick.
Sunil is in the UK on business and is about to meet Martin at the Cavendish Club in London.
Welcome.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Let's go upstairs.
The two men have known each other for several years. Airtel uses a WPP agency for its advertising, but interviewing each other will be a first-time experience.
Martin, you built a phenomenal enterprise, a very successful company, not only very profitable, but you actually influence what the world buys. What were your early learnings during your childhood or through your education that has supported you in achieving what you have today?
I would say, the biggest formative influence on my early life was my father. I will never have as good a friend or as close a confidant as my father. I would speak to him, I would say 3 to 4 times a day, even in the height of what were described as hostile takeovers.
Martin was the only son of Jewish parents of Eastern European descent. They were determined to give him every privilege they could afford.
So they gave me a very good education and gave me all the opportunities that maybe they didn't have. I had a brother, Michael, who died at birth. So I was really the last chance for my mother and my father. So I was doted on and spoiled rigid. So I was, my mother used to package everything in plastic. So it was a miracle that I wasn't packaged in plastic and put in the fridge.
Martin got into Cambridge University and went from there to Harvard Business School. After leaving Harvard in 1968, he acquired some marketing and management experience. Then he went on to become the chief financial officer for the Saatchi brothers, Morris and Charles, in 1977. Their controversial agency, Saatchi & Saatchi, expanded rapidly and was credited with winning the 1979 election for Margaret Thatcher. Their bold campaign changed the face of British politics and advertising forever. But then, at the age of 40, Martin took the most radical step of his life.
In your 20s and 30s, you worked for others.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you decided to switch and become an entrepreneur. Why did you choose to become an entrepreneur?
I think there was probably a little bit of a thing that my father had worked for somebody else. And I felt he never fulfilled his potential. He was one of 7, and you had to go out and you had to earn money. You lived in the East End of London. At the back of my mind, I think there was a sort of a burr under the saddle was he didn't have the opportunity, so maybe I should try. And I could have stayed doing what I was doing at Saatchi's, I guess.
Because you were very successful. When you left, you were at the pinnacle of your career, in the sense that you were leading a very successful enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, I was sometimes described mistakenly as the third brother.
Having decided to leave Saatchi's, Martin teamed up with a friend to buy a stake in a company called Wire and Plastic Products, now called WPP. They made shopping baskets for supermarkets, but that wasn't the attraction. The company provided a vehicle for an ambitious acquisition strategy.
It had to have management which was mature but not senile, because we didn't want to run a manufacturing business. It had to have no debt, had to have freehold property, had to have consistent profitability because we didn't want any aggravation.
What was some of the defining moments to make it so successful?
Well, we started off, a £1 million shell company we took control of, and then we made 18 acquisitions in 18 months. I always wanted to do things on scale and complexity. There are people who are good at starting things and there are people good at managing things, and there are very rarely people who can do both. I wanted to do both, and I always wanted to build a big international company. But the interesting thing about it is you take more risk the smaller you are, because you have so much more to gain. The bigger you get is the safer you get, or the less entrepreneurial or less risk prone you get.
In 1987, WPP set its sights on a really big player. It made a hostile takeover bid for the international advertising agency JWT, which, in terms of sales, was 13 times its size.
It was David and Goliath, and it was very audacious. And I remember my parents being absolutely amazed that it was the front page story in the Times newspaper.
The acquisition of JWT brought with it a valuable lesson.
Luck, as you know, plays a tremendous role in everything. We looked at the balance sheet and we saw, under the caption of freehold property, a freehold property, which we actually thought was Berkeley Square in London. And so we get into JWT, and our CFO, Robert Lowell, and I were there on the first day. And I said to Robert, look, just go and check the fixed assets register. So he called me and he said, look, we found this freehold property, this is literally what happened, in Japan. So about 2 hours later, he comes back on the phone and he said, well, they've come back and they said they will lend us $100 million against this. So we instantly knew it was worth $200 million. Right. And we sold it for $207 million about 6 months later in 1989.
Sunil has watched WPP's acquisition spree with great interest.
You have been picking up companies in every part of the world.
Right.
Every segment of your business.
Right.
How do you do it? I mean, it's to my mind, it's a collection of dozens, if not 100 companies in your portfolio.
We like to keep it messy, looking as though it's messy, because I think the 21st century is not for tidy minds. And having said that, there really are 12 businesses inside WPP. So when we make these acquisitions, they get consolidated into one of those 12 businesses. So they're not sort of loose atoms floating around. There is a method to this madness. And, you know, the stock market, doesn't like big transactions. They think big transactions are more risky transactions. I mean, it's interesting, I shouldn't say this on camera, but you know, if you consolidate 10 transactions into one, it is actually quite a big transaction. But if you do 10 small ones, they don't notice it so much.
You don't have a uniform brand. Many a times,
we're multi-branded.
Yeah, customers go and pick up one of your agencies
Yes.
without even realizing that it's part of the same mother brand.
The answer to that is we're trying to get 100% market share without you knowing it.
That's very clever.
The move, masterminded by Martin.
Martin's acquisition of companies has often ruffled feathers, and the takeover of advertising agency Ogilvy and Mather in 1989 was no exception. The agency's founder, David Ogilvy, was often described as the father of the British ad industry. He was vehemently opposed to Martin's takeover bid and made his views perfectly clear in public.
Am I supposed to sit here on the telephone and say, what a wonderful thing I think it is? I don't. I think it's absolute murder.
The takeover was difficult because David Ogilvy called me an odious... everybody said it was odious little jerk. The Financial Times wrote odious little jerk. It was actually odious little because the Financial Times wouldn't print 4-letter words.
Despite his tough business style, Martin tries to avoid making personal enemies. When he and David Ogilvy finally met, they quickly resolved their differences.
I read every book that David had written, and I think David liked the idea that I'd taken the trouble of researching it. And so we hit it off with one another.
After the deal was done, David wrote to Martin.
It was one of his famous letters, and it was my first public apology. In it, he said, you know, I made a mistake. You know, we should have at least met before I came to the judgment, the OLJ or OLS judgment that I referred to. So it was a very interesting example of, you know, you really do your research. You try and understand the interpersonal dynamics and come up with a solution.
WPP was now a truly global company. It currently runs businesses on 6 continents.
How do you manage? I mean, this is really a mix of different cultures, characters, geographies.
Well, with difficulty is the honest answer.
The biggest issue is getting 115,000 people to work together across 108 countries.
Can you imagine, it's in your own organisation, the same thing, the number of people who every day are thinking about the same problem and then don't share knowledge? The way I think to do it is to have strong local management. Because if the local people don't see that they can get to the top of the companies, it's fatal. It's fatal.
My last question is, people like you and me don't retire. Neither do we fade away.
We get shot.
What is next for Sir Martin?
No, I don't want to retire. You know this as well as I do. Life has become more interesting, not less interesting.
Indian Telecom's billionaire Sunil Mittal is exchanging ideas with British communications guru Martin Sorrell. Sunil set up his first business making bicycle parts when he was just 18, but he had ambitions to do something more adventurous and started importing generators from Japan. He moved on to import telecoms equipment and then bid for India's first mobile phone license. Sunil has quizzed Martin. Now it's Martin's turn to find out how Sunil's company makes its billions.
Tell us how it all started. What were the initial influences on you? Because you started when you were 18.
I passed out of university at 18, not because I was a great student, but I wanted to get out of that place as soon as possible. My learning was more on the streets. While education is a tried, tested, sound way of acquiring knowledge, it's my firm opinion that there are other ways to acquire knowledge as well.
So you're one of these entrepreneurs who didn't like university?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, really not. And I belong to a city called Ludhiana, which is termed as the Manchester of India. It's very industrial, small businesses. There's a lot of enterprise in the air. Everybody's an entrepreneur. And therefore, I was deeply affected by all that I saw in my home city.
Ludhiana was particularly known for its bicycle manufacturing. As soon as he left university, Sunil borrowed some money and set up a company. But it wasn't long before he became restless.
I realized very quickly, in about 12 to 18 months, that I will end up being a big bicycle parts manufacturer 20 years down the road, but that'll be the maximum, vision of my canvas that I can play with. I think I had to move on.
Sunil decided he wanted to do something that would meet a vital need in India.
I grew through huge power shortages. I thought to myself, this little piece of equipment, the portable generator, could light up a few fans and bulbs in homes, and that would be a great success. And it actually turned out to be a terrific success.
But in India, business is rarely straightforward.
Yeah, for 3 years I had a great run. I was the young entrepreneur, but the single largest importer of Suzuki generators in the world, walking on water, feeling great about it. And one fine day, the government decides to ban import of generators.
So then what did you do?
Well, off I went with my bag looking for the next product, and finally landed in Taipei, in Taiwan. And I chanced upon a product which is a push-button phone.
Right.
Until that time, we all had rotary phones.
Right.
But India did not allow import of telephones. You had to bring down parts. So I would buy full telephones, break them down, pack them and send them to India as parts,
So you would disassemble them in Taipei,
Yes.
and then send
Assemble
them
them back in India.
Unbelievable.
And that's how India's first push-button phone was born.
Sunil went on to import India's first cordless phone, first telephone answering machine, and first fax machine. But his ambition didn't stop there. In 1991, a new government was elected in India, which opened the way for entrepreneurs to operate more freely. At this point, Sunil decided to bid for India's first mobile phone license.
We were rank outsiders.
Right.
Nobody gave us a chance to win a mobile license. I would say I threw in everything into it. All the savings that I had, I had put into my bid. It would have been a big setback if I wouldn't have won it. So it was a risky proposition, and I gave it all.
Having gained the license for Delhi, Sunil was keen to expand. But in 1995, when he bid for licenses outside the capital city, he lost out to competitors willing to pay astronomical sums to the government. As he discovered, though, sometimes it pays to bide your time.
In about 2 to 3 years' time, pins started to fall. They started to default in the payments to the government in what they'd committed, and they had to throw in the towel. And that was the time we then went out and picked up a number of these licenses to expand ourselves. Destiny has its own role to play, and Destiny had better things for us.
And then you built the network over the 90s. What were you running at? What were the number of subscribers at that time?
I still remember getting the first 10,000 customers. That was a big celebration in the company.
You've now got 250 million, including Africa.
Nobody could have imagined, including myself, that we would have ever get to a point where we are now.
The Bharti model is to form partnerships with large international companies each time it enters a new business sector or a new market.
So the starting point was nervousness, that will I be able to do something big on my own?
Right.
Always pushed me towards having a handshake with a large entity.
Right.
Over a period of time, that has become a business model. So what's the business model here? These companies look for big markets. And India is a big market. It's a continent of consumers. But they cannot get into these countries on their own, not because they cannot legally.
They need you.
They need a local person, just like you need local people to run
Sure.
it. I need capital, technology, and want to jumpstart rather than working over 10 years to reach the point where I would be with them in a year's time.
Sunil has strong views on how business deals should be done.
For me, relationship is very important. I can lose money, but I cannot lose a relationship. And for me, the test is, at the end of a conversation or a negotiation, both must smile. Neither party should laugh, because if one has laughed, the other has to necessarily be in trouble. We have to have a win-win situation, which I call smiles on both sides.
Partnerships are not the only thing that Sunil prioritizes in his business.
When I think of Sunil, I think of you being the chief brand officer as well. Tell me a little bit about how you feel about the brand.
Brand is very important, especially if you are in services or products which touch customers' lives every day. Internally, the brand has to have values, and in our case, the initial period was aspirational value, because mobile phones in India were supposed to be aspirational. From there, we have gone through this journey where mobile phone is for the masses.
Sunil developed a radical distribution model to sell prepaid minutes on the streets. He recognized that the Western model of contracts and monthly bills wouldn't be popular in India.
People wanted to control their spend on telephone. They were not wanting to receive a bill shock. What had to follow that was mass and very wide distribution. And we thought to ourselves, we must have a prepaid in the reach of everybody in the country.
Sunil asked cigarette vendors to sell his prepaid minutes.
They are on every street, multiple on a street. You are never too far away from a cigarette or a matchstick. They distribute your products, and that, to my mind, was the magic of success for prepaid in India.
You started to look at other things outside India, in the early part of the millennium? The new millennium.
Some years back, we were getting restless. India was doing very well, business was growing at a great...
You've always been restless. You were restless when you had the bike parts, you were restless.
I think that's in my nature, I guess, yes. So we said, what should we do? Do more businesses in India or go outside India? So Walmart, AXA, Del Monte came in for the Indian markets, and we decided to take telecom into Africa.
In 2010, Sunil bought Zain, a mobile phone company which was operating in 15 African countries. This move proved to be a huge challenge.
To be honest with you, when we went in, we were quite clear that the company will be weak. But it was not weak, it was broken. And that kind of shocked us, and we had to work about 2 years to stabilize this ship.
Africa is very sexy. Have we become too enamored with it and its potential and ignore the realities?
I wouldn't say it's sexy, but it's topical. I mean, people now are saying it's the last frontier,
right?
Which I believe it is. Now, to your point, is it a breeze? No. There are very big issues in Africa, especially in the countries that I operate in. Congo, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso, Sierra Leone. I mean, these are difficult countries. This is the last frontier. This is the biggest potential, untapped potential that is left in the world. So you can see everybody's focusing on it. Africa is on the rise. You have to be patient. You have to be long-term. And now Africa is being talked about. It will happen.
And in India, Sunil's Bharti Group has been branching out into a diverse range of business sectors.
You're not just telecoms in India. What about retail? What about agriculture? What about those things in the context of India?
One test that we have for our businesses is it must serve the vital needs of the country. Telecom has done it in an amazing way. I believe the food and agriculture product, the project that we are doing, is not taken off in the way we wanted, but it's started to make a difference. We have set up a model farm in Punjab to demonstrate to the farmers the best practices, where we do experiments and show farmers how to improve the production. India is still wasting 30% of its fresh produce, both vegetables and fruits. And we are talking about 35 million tons. That can feed many nations. We need to capture that wastage and make it productive and put them on the tables of people. Right. For that, you need cold chain, cold transportation, the entire logistics chain. Once that will open up, you will see consumers gaining because of low prices, farmers gaining because they get more money, which will help the country.
India's growing economy provides plenty of scope for other businesses, including retail.
Should we waste that knowledge that we have about India, retail will eventually open up in this country in a big way. So while choosing a partner, we came very close to signing up with Tesco when we decided that Walmart will be more appropriate for India because they have a model which is more frugal in their approach. And Tesco is a little upmarket-ish from Indian standpoint.
Sunil and Martin may run very different businesses, but they are united by a keen appetite for expansion. For Sunil, it's through new business sectors. Martin sticks to the business he knows, but always has an eye out for new territories to conquer.
Myanmar suddenly becomes acceptable. That's 66 million people. Who would have thought that would exist as an opportunity. So Cuba might be the same. I don't know whether North Korea will ever be the same, but I doubt it.
One day, hopefully.
One day, who knows. Anyway, Sunil, as ever, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
I wanted to check how he manages such a diversified workforce in different parts of the world, and that was very revealing and very useful for me.
A complete businessman. A titan. Not only with a business purpose, with a strong social purpose too.
The Ideas Exchange, in association with HSBC.